So if we want to simplify our mesh and have fewer polygons, edges, and vertices, we can go about this in multiple ways. The easiest way to do that is just to simply delete components that we have selected. We can do this by selecting the component. So I'm going to go to face mode, select this, and press either backspace or delete. Each component type has kind of particular rules that are associated with them, which take getting used to. So for instance, on a boundary on the outside, I can't delete an edge, right? But I can delete a vertice on the boundary. Inside the mesh, I can't just by default delete a vertice, but I can delete an edge. So I don't want to go into the specific edge cases of everything, but in general, you just kind of have to get used to and understanding how you can delete geometry by default. Frequently, I will be deleting something like an entire edge loop at the same time or multiple edges, right? So I'm going to double click on this edge to select this whole edge loop, and I'm going to press backspace or delete. Something that new users to Maya might not understand at first is that I'm actually leaving behind floating vertices. So it deleted the edge, but the vertices stayed behind. So now these polygons are no longer four-sided. You can see it's actually six-sided. If I switch over to vertice mode, you'll notice, oh, there's vertices behind. I don't need vertices there. I should get rid of those. What we can do is we can, of course, come into vertice mode and delete those. But instead, what we can do is we can select that edge loop. And if I want to delete both the edges and the vertices that are going to be left behind at the same time, I can either come up to here to edit mesh and delete edge / vertex. And you can see it has a hotkey of Control plus delete. Now when I come to vertex mode, you see I already cleaned up those vertices for me. So that's really useful using that Control delete to get rid of the vertices as well, instead of having to go through and clean up your mesh all the time. Because usually when you delete those edges, you don't really need those vertices hanging around in most cases. So besides deleting our components, we can also use two other tools that will help us simplify our geometry and get rid of extra components that we don't need. First one I want to take a look at is the merging operation, and these can be found under Edit Mesh. We have two of them that we're going to take a look at, which is Merge and Merge to Center. So with Merge, I'm going to select all of these vertices at the same time. You can choose a smaller selection. You can determine however many you want to operate at the same time, but I'm going to operate on all of these vertices at the same time. I'm going to Edit Mesh, Merge, and the way this works is that this is going to take your selection and a distance, and anything that falls within that distance is actually going to be combined together. So I'll go ahead and hold Control Shift so I can increase this value really slowly. So you'll see as I'm increasing this value, anything that falls under that distance will start to be sucked together and combined into one single vertice. And as I keep going, it's going to keep going further. But after a certain point, because everything will collapse essentially into a single point, it tells me I can't go any further than that. So you can see right there it says, no vertices were merged, tolerance too large, no geometry left after merge. So if you're getting rid of all your faces and there's nothing left, it's not going to let you do that. You can see I can come in here and I can slowly stitch together and get those vertices that I want. So this is actually very useful, especially if you want to mirror an object and the edges that are left in the center are not actually connected after the mirror. Here's an example I'm going to demonstrate on. So I have this back character, and I want to mirror her across to the other half. We're not going to go over mirroring right now. I'm just going to do it quickly to show you. So I'll go ahead and mirror my character, set that axis position to object, and you'll notice that there's a tiny, tiny gap because my center line wasn't actually lined up with the center of my object, which commonly happens with the mirror option. So there's an option we can mess around with in here, but I'm going to show you with the merge operation. So let's select my mesh and go to merge. And I have to play with this value, of course, because you can see it's combining mesh vertices I don't want to combine. But I can play with this value until I just get exactly what I want to merge together. And you'll see once I get it to this really, really small increment that it's actually starting to grab just the center line and combine them together. You have to be careful because you can see anything else that also happens to be that same distance or smaller is also going to get caught. So you can see when I combine them together, there's some parts in the nose right here that are getting merged together. So this is always the best option, depending on how small or your edges are and how close together your vertices are. But the edit mesh operation can definitely help with situations like these. Here's another example I'm going to demonstrate with. In this case, I duplicated a little single piece, and I've used duplicate special to make multiple copies. You can see down here, I only have each of these are actually disconnected. They're not actually connected to each other. They just happen to line up perfectly with one another to make this repeating pattern. So in order to actually connect these together, it would be tedious to actually have to manually merge them. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all this geometry. I'm going to go to Edit Mesh, and I'm going to go to Merge. And I'll have to play with this value, but in this case, since they're like pretty much right on top of each other, I don't really have to play with it that much. And then those edges that are touching, or those vertices are touching, are now merged together. So you can see when I double click on this, this is all now one continuous mesh instead of a bunch of different copies that are just touching edges together. So edit mesh, or using the merge tool under the edit mesh option can really help us save some time. Sometimes we want to go a little bit faster instead of having to play with thresholds and making specific selections and hoping that we get the right distance so we can merge things together. In that case, I typically use under Edit Mesh the merge to center. And all that's going to do is whatever you have selected, it's going to merge those selected vertices to a central position. And that's determined on just by how Maya is automatically deciding what is the center. So I'll just select that, go Edit Mesh, merge to center. You'll see it's going to merge those all together. So that's a quick and dirty way of doing merging. And usually, especially if I want to just combine two vertices together, that's a really popular option for me. You can also find it right here for merge to center. I can do this in edge mode as well with the collapse option. So I can just select this and I can go ahead and click on collapse. You can see when I hover over it, it tells you remove selected components by merging their adjacent vertices. So that's just another way that we can merge things together. And for a more interactive experience, we can use what's called the target weld tool. And this is right here, or you can find it on the mesh tools, target weld. So the target weld tool is great because it works in both vertex and edge mode. And so what I can do is I can select a vertice and I can just click and drag them from one location to the next, and you'll see it goes ahead and merges them together. And I can do this in edge mode as well. Click and drag. And so this is a really great tool for merging very specific edges and vertices in a really quick and efficient way. So I don't have to select things, go into a button and click it, in this menu multiple times. I can actually just come in here and easily just start welding them together with the target weld tool. So that's the target weld tool, and it's really great for quickly combining vertices and edges together to simplify your geometry or modify your topology. So in summary, if we want to get rid of edges and vertices or faces, we can simply delete them. When we are deleting edges, frequently we will be leaving behind floating vertices, and that's no good. So usually it's a good idea to actually delete edges and vertices at the same time. So I'll select this edge, and I'm going to do Control Delete, which is the hotkey, or I can find it under Edit Mesh, which is delete edge vertice. We can also delete components using the merge tools. So this will combine components together, primarily vertices. So I can select a selection and I can use merge and then use a threshold, a distance threshold to change what gets combined together. Anything that's below that distance threshold will be combined together. I can also use merge to center, which is going to be doing the same thing, but it's not going to really be using that distance function to figure out what specifically to combine together. And for a more interactive approach, and honestly, the one that I use probably the most out of all of these is going to be target weld, or the target weld tool. And that just lets us interactively combine edges together and combine vertices together in a very quick and easy way.